First of all, I would like to thank once again Embassy of Israel, who very often in the past contributed to TTGV, coming together with excellent Israeli companies on the technology side. And this contribution has really been very meaningful for our society and companies. I thank very much to Ram and Burak for joining us today. And I will take just a few moments to see what I expect from this meeting. Personally, I believe without the COVID-19, this disruption was already coming. You know, I think many of the countries, companies, people who are responsible for efficiencies and value added that bring together the nature and the human beings together and define new terms for efficiencies and value added, it is coming to a new stage. And this disruption was already coming, and disruption means change, and change dictates choice, and choice dictates risks and opportunities. And when we look at how we can manage all these things, it is mainly data-based in many of its forms, as big data, as thick data, as raw data, or you know, in many other forms of it that we are seeing. And more and more, a higher level of cooperation, which is, you know, described in the New World as nestedness, is becoming very important. And I'm really looking into the next stage of cooperation of Turkish companies and Israeli companies coming together and really define new value add and efficiencies that will really make this part of the world much more beautiful. And in this respect, as I said, the disruption and all the uncertainty and chaos that is going to be associated with it in the short term definitely requires that we should be very careful on how we can make all these things data-based, and the analysis and everything that is associated with that. And as someone in the electronics and computer industry for a long time, I can really see that the data and the approach to big data, access to it can be fast and can be open and can be secure, but only two of them at a time. It can be fast and open, it can be open and secure, it can be fast and secure, but not the other remaining third part. And in this respect, I think the technology, especially emanating from Israel, is very important. And I'm definitely sure in a short period of time, we will be able to see fast, open, and secure data at the same time. My belief, I'd like to point out that this is my social work, but on the professional side, I work for Vestel, and we have already invested in SCADAfence, which is an Israeli company on cybersecurity on the factory floors and all these machinery, smart machinery, which are being more and more attacked by the hackers and everything. So I'm a firm believer in our cooperation between the two countries. I'm a firm believer that in a cooperative way, we can develop many more aspects of these data-based approaches in many areas, from healthcare to transportation and everything. And I look forward to making our side of the contribution to this. I'd like to once again thank Ram and Burak for sharing with us their ideas on this. And I'd like to introduce Roy Gilad, who is now the charge d'affaires of the Israeli embassy in Turkey. And let me just quickly go through the background. Mr. Gilad is a graduate from Tel Aviv University in history of the Middle East, which is very important, and MA degree from the Hebrew University of Jerusalem, again on the history of Middle East, and Haifa University and Ministry of Defense College. He has also done further studies on national defense, held many positions on the foreign affairs side of the Israeli government and institutions, Director of Department in Center for Policy Research, Director of Export Control and Special Advisor on African Affairs on Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Also, though Israel, he has worked on many Israeli embassies, the Secondary Secretary at Nairobi, spokesperson and media counselor in Amman, Minister Counselor for Political Affairs in London, Consul General to Mideast of USA in Chicago. And since 2019, we have the great pleasure of having him as charge d'affaires in Embassy of Israel in Ankara. The floor is yours, Gilad. Thank you, Mr. Gilad. Thank you.
Mr. Ultav, thank you very much, sir, for the nice introduction. Welcome, Ram from Israel. Welcome, Burak from Turkey. Indeed, it's a unique opportunity for us. As you said earlier on, this embassy and the TTGV, we have a relationship that goes way back. Indeed, unfortunately, in the last year, all kinds of reasons have kind of pushed down the partnership. But let me hope that this will be kind of a restart to the strong partnerships that used to be between TTGV and the embassy. And we commit ourselves from our end that this is going to continue. We know about your activity. And again, I think your contribution to this world, to the technological development world in Turkey is really second to none, and we know to appreciate it. Talking a little bit about the Israeli side, I'm sure Ram is going to do it in a much professional way, but I think one thing needs to be that we can all pay attention that Israel is having, not only on cyber overall, but mainly on cyber, a very unique ecosystem that brings a very close partnership between the government on one end, industry, academy, and in the case of cyber, also the army. And this partnership between those four elements is leaning on a lot of trust, a lot of confidence, and very close relationship. And this partnership managed to produce answers which are very quick and very good for many challenges that Israel is facing, just like Turkey. As Ultav, you said yourself, I think the system in Israel, because of this unique ecosystem I spoke about, managed to be very quick whenever we are facing challenges. And as we all know, there is no short of challenges. I hope that Mr. Levi is going also to speak about the CERT, which is the Computer Emergency Response Team, which again, many countries, including Turkey, has. In each country, it's a little bit different. In Israel, we are very happy with our CERT. Again, I hope Ram will be able to speak a little bit longer about it. COVID-19, indeed, as the lady who opened the meeting said, provided new challenges, some of them by non-state actors, mainly criminals, some of them by state actors, by pariah state actors that their names should not be mentioned here. And yet, basically, when it's coming to cyber, whether the attack is coming from a non-state actor or whether it's coming from a state actor, at the end of the day, it is the same attack, and this is part of the responsibility of the government to give defense facing these challenges. Last but not least, on the bilateral issue, Israel and Turkey, unfortunately, currently, we have no partnership on the issue of cyber on the national, on the government level. from reasons that you all can understand. However, there is partnership on the commercial level, as you yourself said, Mr. Ultav, companies that you are a member of is investing money in Israeli companies. Checkpoint, which is one of the biggest Israeli cyber defense companies, gave here a presentation in 2019. I attended it together with more than 300 people. I think it was the biggest commercial presentation I saw here in the last year. Some other Israeli companies are working here as well. And let me end my few remarks with the hope that when the bilateral relationship will be better, then we can also have a partnership in the field of cyber also on the national level. I thank you very much, and I'm looking forward for a very interesting seminar today.
Oh, thank you very much. Ram, the audience is yours. We can start with your presentation. Thank you so much.
Good afternoon from Tel Aviv. Do you see my screen?
Yes.
Yes.
Great. Great. So I prepared a few slides to discuss the subject of this meeting, and I would like to give you a short presentation of how we see the change in the challenges in protecting cyberspace because of COVID-19. Before I begin, I would like to give you a short introduction of myself, and I would like to discuss two things. First is given a general overview of why we have issues in securing the digital space and how this impacts our ability to conduct that during the pandemic. And then at the end, I'll discuss some lessons learned and give you some giveaways. And I hope that I will meet the time frame that I've been given. So please feel free to stop me. I live and breathe cybersecurity, so I can speak about it as long as I can. Just a few words about myself. Yes, I'm the CEO of Konfidas. We're a cybersecurity consulting firm in Israel. I also advise the International Union of Aerospace Insurers. I've been involved with conducting and creating Israel's cybersecurity policy. This was the Prime Minister's National Cyber Task Force. And I teach cybersecurity at the university and in various places. I've been in the area for more than 15 years, and some of the things that I will discuss with you today are not theory based on research, but actually things that we see with the companies that we work with in Israel, which are the leading companies, from pharmaceutical companies to banks, and they are conclusions and lessons learned from what we see in the field and the real challenges that they face. The first question that comes in mind is, what is cyber? And in the context of what we're speaking today, we're speaking about the dark side of everything that digitalization has gave us. In other words, we're speaking about a risk that is coming from an adversary. Unlike most of other risks that some of them are force majeure or COVID-19, which is, we hope that it wasn't engineered by anyone. Cyber risks are risks that behind them there are adversaries that have motivations, and they take the time and knowledge to know basically better than those who need to secure their networks what is in the networks. This is their advantage. We have to be successful all the time, whereas they have to be successful just once. And this advantage is something that we find that many companies find hard to understand. They actually have an adversary that they have to understand. They have to know what they want, and it's not always straightforward as it seems. We see a lot of cases when we do incident response that companies are attacked. They don't know who attacked them. They have no idea what their motivation was. Sometimes it's money, sometimes it's information, sometimes it's creating disruption. Sometimes the adversaries can be nation states, and sometimes they can be criminals, and sometimes they can be hackers. Just like the challenge that they can show that they can hack to companies that seem to be secure. But I can say that without a doubt, although we hear a lot about the high-scale attacks, especially those nation-state attacks, because they're interesting and they're very sexy to discuss, most attacks go under the radar, and they are for criminal purposes. people want to steal money, just like happened today. Someone hacked Twitter. They're hijacking Twitter accounts in order to make more bitcoins and steal money. So we have to put that in context. Why is that important? Because if we think about the tools we need to apply in order to reduce the risk, we need to think more about law enforcement tools, the nation state tools, because law enforcement tools are much more suitable for the mission than nation state tools. And I'll discuss that in further. What's important to understand is that one key aspect or one key advantage of hackers is that what is written to you right in front of you right now. This is one of the most important presentations that was given by Rob Joyce. He was the former commander of the tailored access operation of the NSA and then the advisor for the Trump administration on cybersecurity. Is that in the mind of the hackers, they put the time to know the networks that we secure better than us. So if we really want to protect our networks, we got to go back to the basics. We got to go back to understand what we need to secure. And only by doing that step continuously, and I'll discuss that, we will be able to reduce the risk, which has increased dramatically during COVID-19. So we are left with three challenges. The first one is attribution. We got to know who's attacking, and we don't know that. To be honest, most attacks, we don't know who's attacking. And if we don't know who's attacking, meaning we cannot attribute the attack, we cannot deter the attackers because they will not pay a price. There is no punishment at the end. The second thing is risk management and complexity, and I'll touch that in the next slides, which has increased during COVID-19. And the third challenge is how we do cybersecurity in SMB, because cybersecurity, at the end of the day, is an expense which is expensive. Large corporations like banks are highly regulated. They have very deep pockets. And for them, adding $10 million in order to secure their networks is not a big expense in relation to the revenue. But for small companies who now have regulation like GDPR or other privacy regulation or contractual obligation, because they're working with the big companies, it's a big expense and most of them do not do it. This is exactly why hackers are going directly into the weakest link in the chain, which are the small companies. And we see it more and more. Now, I touched the complexity, and I'd like to touch this complexity more and more time because it's key to understanding the issue of secure networks. We are dealing with a changing risk landscape on a daily basis. Just yesterday, Oracle has issued vulnerabilities, SAP issued vulnerabilities, Microsoft issued 123 vulnerabilities. One of them is a 0-day, which is 17 years old. It can act like a worm, and it can propagate remotely from the network. It's a 17-year-old vulnerability, which can affect almost every Windows server from 2003 until 2019. Home routers, meaning on a daily basis, we have to continuously assess the risk. And we have 300 new vulnerabilities each week and 15,000 new vulnerabilities every year. Now, if you take that and do the math, that means that in a small corporation of, let's say, 10,000 people, we have million risks at any given point if we assume that the network is stable. Now, here it's where it gets complex. Networks are never stable. And COVID-19 changed everything because it forces most companies in the world to start working remotely. If you work remotely, that means that you change the way your network is built. If you change the way your network is built, that means that you have more vulnerabilities. If you have more vulnerabilities, the risk goes high. And that's very key to understand why it's very hard and practically almost impossible to deal with cybersecurity without understanding what are your assets. How does all this relate to COVID-19? Well, to start with, the cyber criminals are all over the world. And now there is a joint fear, there is a joint issue that can be used in order to statistically create attacks that their viability, meaning the successful adversary victims that will fall in the statistic attack, will be high. And now it is critical more than ever to secure our networks and communication. Why? Because if we work remotely, we are dependent on the ability to collaborate, and collaborations mean communications. And if we have no communication, then we have no ability to collaborate. This is why the need to collaborate is even stronger in COVID-19, because if people will not be able to communicate and work from home, the impact on the economy, which is already high, will be even higher. Just to put things in perspective, in a research that was released recently by the National Institute of Science and Technology in the United States, until recently we thought that the impact of cybercrime was about 0.7% of the US GDP. I'm taking US as an example, but we can apply that to Western economies, or to economies in general all over the world. But strong data suggests right now that the impact is between 2.5 and 4% of the GDP, or the impact of cybercrime. We just had an issue of measurement. And since we have new strong data by the US Department of Justice, we can now assume that the impact of cybercrime is even higher. When it comes to working remotely, the need to have secure network goes even high, because not only the impact of COVID-19 is high on the economy, and we know that because we see the impact every day. If we will not be able to communicate, the impact on the economy will be a disaster. And I'm not even speaking about the ability to conduct attacks that will bring down the networks, and that will have a disaster effect on the economies. What does it mean on the new normal? The new normal, and this is according to research published by Checkpoint, is that we do three things that have rapidly changed the way that we work. First, we work from home. Banks work from home. Governments work from home. High-tech companies work from home. Everybody's working from home in order to avoid and decrease the infection rate. That means that now the home is the new perimeter, and securing home is much harder than securing the office. We see more collaboration, and we see accelerated transition to the cloud. And as I said before, once you transition and you change technology, you increase the attack surface. And how adversaries use it is actually quite tricky. First, they quickly seize the opportunities to exploit the crisis, and I'll show you a few examples of what they're doing it. Very sophisticated social engineering attacks, which are exploiting the fear and uncertainty of people. For example, we saw that there were attacks promising for 75 cents to show you and give you an indication if there were COVID-19 people sick around you. Of course, private citizens cannot give you this information. And if you pay 75%, not only they stole your 75 cents, but they also stole your credit card, and they start shopping with your credit card online. That's just one example. Companies are opening up their networks. That means that the attack surface grows exponentially, because it's happening all over the world. And what hackers are doing, they're scanning the internet and looking for those companies who did not do a job that is well enough in order to close the attack surface. It's much harder to conduct incident response because people got to stay home, and some of them are not considered to be critical to the economy. Here I got to say something positive to the Israeli government. And when we decided who are critical workers, then cybersecurity services companies in Israel are considered to be critical service, and therefore we can work in the office, and we're actually allowed to travel even in times of closure. So that's a very big thing. Another thing is that working patterns have changed. If we were used to work in the office and people would come at 8 o'clock in the morning and leave at 5 o'clock in the afternoon, for example, now when people work from home, from their home PC, it's very hard to detect anomalies. And one of the techniques that we use when we do security is we look for anomalies. For example, why would an employee would access their email on a Friday night at 12 p.m. if they've never done it before? That's an anomaly. And now when people work from home, that means that it's very hard to detect and know the difference between attackers and actually and workers, which makes it much harder for the security people in their offices to do their work. And last but not least, since we work from home, home is now the new perimeters. Employees are their own chief information security officer, and we got to give them the knowledge on how to secure their home, because their home has become part of the network. And as I told you before, we see vulnerabilities in home equipment on a weekly basis, which is exploited by hackers, have no doubt about it. Here are some examples. This is an example of a phishing email from the CDC. That's an example of a phishing email from the World Health Organization. Look at the title, Urgent Information, the first human COVID-19 vaccine test result update. They're creating interest in the user, in the victim. They're getting them to click the link, and sometimes they're taking their credentials. Sometimes they're installing a malware, and sometimes they'll just lead them to another website which will install a malware. It's called a water holing attack. Those are attacks on SMS. We see them on a daily basis all over the world, in Israel as well. That's an attack, a shipment attack, because now there's an increase in home shipment, like Amazon shipping. So they're using, or DHL, so they're using them to fool people in order to download a PDF with a malware, and then someone is sitting on your computer and they can do whatever you want. And we see that quite a lot. This is from March, by the way. In terms of data, the data doesn't lie. 80% of the attacks recently are related to COVID-19. 788 increase in fake domain registration, which could be malicious domain. 320% increase in malicious websites. From April, we saw 30,000 attacks that are related to the virus. And all government institutions, including CDC, the World Health Organization, the Canadian Health Organizations, government health organizations are being attacked or used for attack. And it's very hard to distinguish between what's legitimate and what's not legitimate. I just had an issue just 5 minutes ago before we started the call. Apparently, the National Security Agency in Israel has decided to start sending SMSs to Israel, which was very strange, and apparently it was a legitimate one. But the next thing that will happen is that hackers will use the legitimate SMSs sent by the national security in order to send unlegitimate SMSs, because it's very hard to fake SMS. We also saw attacks on hospital and research institutions. I believe we will see a lot more than that, especially from nation-state actors, those who want to increase the chaos that is already happening and increase the tensions within some countries. We saw political attacks against health organizations. Specifically, Iran was attacking the World Health Organization. North Korea was attacking institutions in South Korea. Attacks from China. This is not new, but we thought that we will not see attacks on hospitals and pharmaceutical companies. But once again, we were wrong. In the beginning, there was an increase in quality of attacks, but then slowly we started seeing a decrease in quality, but increase in quantity, meaning they're using fraudulent applications that penetrate the Google Play Store. War dialing, meaning you dial to many people in order to create more scams, and things like that. We saw hackers that are using the fact that we do more collaboration and specifically targeting Zoom. And we saw a lot of warnings around that. Here, I got to say a good word to Zoom that understood the challenge, that they're growing from a multi-million-dollar company to probably a multi-billion-dollar company. And they decided to address the issue. They got an all-star security team in order to secure the platform. They issued a 90-day cybersecurity plan, and they're actually doing quite a good work to secure the platform and secure the privacy-related issues that were found, at least in the beginning of the pandemic. And as I said, there's also increase once the governments are starting to spray money, then the hackers will try to get those money, and we see a lot of fraud-related scams for obtaining funds that are dedicated for small businesses. That's especially in the US. I'd like to take 2 more minutes to discuss the possibility of a cyber attack that will be a pandemic. Here we got to understand that the reproductive rate of COVID-19 is R0, meaning every 2 or 3 days we see, or sometimes 5 days, we see a multiplication in the number of people that have been infected in the virus. Computer viruses or computer worms act a little bit differently, and the R0 of cyber attacks is 27, meaning the reproduction rate of an attack that is aiming towards computers and digital assets will be 20 times more faster than COVID-19. Just think about the implication. Now, as I said just a few minutes ago, just yesterday, we found a malware, Check Point found a malware, and Microsoft disclosed it. It's a 17-year-old malware that can allow you to attack every Windows server in the world and act as a worm. meaning it can propagate within the network. Now, if that will happen, one day without an internet will cost the global economy $15 billion, and that's assuming, that we're not as dependent on communication as we are on COVID-19. And 25 days without computers, and may I remind you that the NotPetya attack that started in Ukraine and propagated to companies all over the world caused companies as giant like AP Moller-Maersk to be shut down for more than 10 days and a loss of more than $300 million. So we can assume that if there's going to be a widespread pandemic to computers, meaning a cyber pandemic, the loss to the economy, especially in times where we are dependent on communication so much, will be in the areas of the trillions. And we got to think about that as well, not only on the tactical needs for doing security. I will end with 5 lessons and 2 recommendations. Lesson number 1 is that we need proper communication, and it's key for effective measures against COVID-19. That means, when I say proper communications, I mean that we need bandwidth, we need it to work properly, and we need it to work securely. Attackers are not in quarantine. They're attacking all the time. We see a decrease in quantity, and now we see an increase in quality. That means that we need to increase the way that we manage the risk. Most casualties are SMBs and governments. Governments have the deep pockets in order to do security, but we got to think right now how we secure those SMBs, because they're the ones who will be used in order to penetrate the larger corporations. I mean, if I got to attack a bank, I'm not going to attack the bank. I'm going to attack the supply chain of the bank and go to the bank through the supply chain. And that's a key in order to understand, because we are all connected together. So we are only strong as our weakest links. And right now, SMBs and especially employees of SMBs that work from home have become the weakest link in securing the digital space. Cybersecurity protection must go back to the basics. We got to speak about cyber hygiene. People are not doing what is very straightforward, and I'll discuss it in the next slide. And in the case of cyber attack with characteristics similar to a pandemic, it will be much faster, and we need to start preparing for a situation like that. Now, when I say cyber hygiene for COVID-19, that means 5 things. First thing we need to do is understand what we need to defend continuously. It changes all the time. It's not a one-time thing. It's not a physical security camera that we put in our house and the house doesn't change. The digital house changes every day, and that's a big difference. The next thing is what we got to keep, just like we wash our hands, we got to keep our operating systems updated all the time, every day. There is no way around that. If we don't do that, we can be hacked. I see that most people don't like to pay for antiviruses, but antiviruses are a key one key aspect in order to secure what can be hacked. And one very simple thing to do, and Microsoft has shown that it can decrease the risk of phishing by 99.9%, is 2-factor authentication for all important accounts. And for some reason, less than 2% of the global population has decided to enable 2-factor authentication. Now, the numbers don't lie. 99.9% decrease in the risk if you enable 2-factor authentication. 2-factor authentication is a second password after your password. You receive an SMS to your phone. It's valid for 1, sometimes 2 minutes, and that decreases the risk dramatically. So I suggest do it right away. And last but not least, cyber insurance is a very good mechanism for transferring the risk to insurance companies. Unlike other insurance areas, cyber insurance is an area where the insurance companies not only pay you for the financial loss, but they help you if something happens. Because they have the knowledge, they have the people, they have the expertise, and for a premium which is not very high, you can be sure that if something happens, there will be someone by your side that can pay for some of your losses, but mainly give you the experience of how to deal with the attack effectively. I would like to thank you for inviting me to talk. I hope that my few words here were productive, and I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Okay, we will answer the questions at the end. We'll convey the questions to you and to Mr. Burak Aydın. Thank you very much. Actually, last few slides were very important, I guess. Cyber pandemic and hygiene for cybersecurity is a quite interesting concept that we should take it very seriously. And I hope that your presentation will bring some new insights for the solution of this problem. And now, Mr. Burak Aydın, we're ready to listen to your presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Seda Hanım. Let me share my presentation very quickly. Yeah, I think you can see my presentation. First of all, thank you, TTGV, Cengiz Bey, for inviting me for this webinar. It will be my pleasure to talk about the cybersecurity. Actually, I wanted to headline of this presentation the day after tomorrow, because we are living in a very interesting days nowadays because of this COVID pandemic, and the cybersecurity is becoming more and more important. And thanks Ram Levi for a great presentation. I think my presentation will be very similar to his thoughts, but with different aspects. Before proceeding, Sabancı DX is a daughter company of the Sabancı Group companies, and we are focusing on more digital and analytics in the new era. And we just established this company on top of the BIMSA, which was the system integrator company. So on top of our system integrator muscles, we are building advanced analytics, artificial intelligence, and cybersecurity. The corporate cybersecurity services are various, and we are working on the assessment and consultancy services also. But I don't want to make any marketing and deep dive into the slide set very quickly with the limited time perspective. In the day of COVID, actually, right now, everything is about the COVID, because it's not a crisis. It's really very impactful and very disruptive change to our personal lives and also business life. So it changed everything, and it looks like this change will, to some extent, stick to our personal life and the business life. So we are talking about COVID, and all economies, all verticals are impacted from the COVID. Ranging from agricultural to airline industry to medical industry to education. So everything is heavily impacted by COVID. But it's a fact that the old age is over. If you want it or not, but the age is over. I think in line with the TTGV name of this event, we are resetting our lives and the business life. When we take a look at the World Economic Forum, the most worrisome risk for the companies, according to this survey, in the day of COVID, the first one is the global economy. There's ups and downs in the global economy. The second one is the bankruptcies related to global economy. But the third thing is the cyber attack and the data fraud. It was a bit surprised for myself. I was expecting a more economic-related worrisome risks in this survey, but as you can see, cyber attacks in the top 3. The other World Economic Forum risk outlook is very similar to this one. When you take a look at the short-term risk, again, the cybersecurity and infrastructure cyber attacks in the top 5. And in the long-term risk outlook, data fraud or theft and cyber attacks in the top 10. So the World Economic Forum, the think tank of the world, is underlining the importance of the cybersecurity and the cyber attacks. Of course, it's no coincidence, because our lives are more digital. We are using lots of gadgets to connect to internet, exchange information with us, with each other, and we are just accessing e-commerce, mobile commerce, and the banks through our mobile gadgets. And we are living lots of digital footprint and handprint. So we are really using this technology as a part of our life. And also, not only personal lives, but the business life is really digital savvy nowadays. And we are talking about the robotic automations. We are talking about the Industry 4.0. We are talking about the 5G. The sensors comes up with this 5G. And there is a huge economy with this, and this has been happening for the last 20 to 25 years, but it has been accelerated for the last 5 years. But now the COVID comes up with the multiple effect. Right now, as we all discuss in the social media, COVID is accelerating the digital transformation, and we have covered the digital transformation. Normally, it should be covered in 10 years, in 1 year. So right now, everything is accelerated, and we are living lots of digital footprints. Everything is more digitized and more analytical nowadays. And all with this, with more digital footprints, personal and machinery, it's a growing big market for the cyber attacks and the hackers. These are the numbers that I collected very recently. As you can see, we are experiencing, in 1 or 4 people are experiencing a data breach. The cost per lost record is $150, and it's increasing with the smaller firms, like Ram Levi says, and it's decreasing with the larger firms. And as you can see, that the survey by the Forrester in this red one, you can see that we are experiencing a 32% cyber attacks in the last 12 months, and 27 is the twice attack that we have suffered in the last 12 months. So there are various reasons for data breach. Various reasons for the data breach. But when you take a closer look, the most of the breaches are coming from the weakest point, and most of the time the weakest point is the persons, the people living in the companies are the weakest points. This slide is talking about how the different verticals are affected, and how is the risk is scattered in different verticals. As you can see, the large banks, telecom operators, and financial services are really investing a lot for the cyber security. But when you go to the startups, they are really underinvested, and they are open to the cyber attacks. Startups and the SMBs, just like Ram Levi mentioned. And most disruptive fraud events by industry, you can see it varies, but in the government and health industries, it's in the top 1 position, and also in the technology, media, and telecommunication. And in financial services and industry, the cybercrime is the second one with 15% share. And as you can see in the lower right diagram, the government, telecommunication, resource and banking industries are heavily spending on the cybersecurity investment. So with the various pictures, we don't have a homogeneous screen. We have a very heterogeneous picture in front of us. With the cybersecurity attacks are increasing every year, their nature is differentiating. Right now, the malware and malicious insiders, ransomwares are in an increase, and we can see a very different forms of this one. But there is one more thing is happening. The technologies used in the cyber attacks are also evolving, and evolving much more than we expected to see. Right now, they are using a very highly sophisticated artificial intelligence cyber attacks, or they are really coming up with a very sophisticated social engineering methods that it's really sometimes difficult to differentiate if it's real or fake. So throughout the time they are evolving, and it looks like it will continue to evolve in a faster pace than we expected to see. So how we come up with a solution? I'm an ex-Intel Corporation guy. I just run the Intel Turkey team for the 6.5 years. So I'm very familiar with the Andy Grove, the only paranoid survive quotation. I think it really resonates well in the cyber world and cyber security world. We need to be very paranoid, and complacency really hurts us a lot. So this is the one motto that I would like to underline. We need to keep on being paranoid to survive, and it's a rule number 1 to avoid the cyber attack. And this the left-hand side picture is from Interpol, the cyber safety checklist. These are the rule of thumbs. I mean, backup online, offline, strengthen your home network, get rid of the weakest change, use the strong passwords. But it's not enough. You need to be very paranoid, and you need to do everything in the right format. The right-hand side, I tried to summarize one of the 6 important things that I would like to talk about. The most of the time that I mentioned, the weakest point is the employees itself, because when you open a gate by an employee just clicking an executable file, then the hackers have an access to the databases and they can do whatever they want. So employee awareness is a key, and continuous learning is the most important thing. You need to create the highest awareness at the employee level all the time. That's rule number 1. The cybersecurity risk assessments are vital, and it should be regularly done. And the assessments should be very taken seriously. And as a result of this assessments, the security holes should be fulfilled, and there should be different scenarios, crisis scenarios should be in place as a part of this assessment. Rule number 3 is don't under-resource or underestimate the cyber attacks. Most of the companies are really underestimating the cyber security and under-resourcing in the companies. And they don't become aware of the fact that the cyber security is very important unless they come up with a big hit. So it's important to put some resources on the cyber security and be on top of the cyber security all the time. And like Ram said, the up-to-date infrastructure is the key. Even if you need to update every week, you need to update, because there are lots of security breaches and security holes discovered by the hackers. Just like this Twitter case, when you take a look at today's news, you can see it's all over the place, and most probably it's because of a security breach or security hole in the system coming from inside. So the up-to-date information infrastructure is very critical. And cybersecurity insurance, if everything goes wrong, then the insurance is critical. Right now in Turkey, the cybersecurity insurance coming from the insurance companies, one after the other. So you can take a look at this insurance and mitigate your risk by taking this insurance. And last but not least, I would like to repeat, we need to be paranoid about the cybersecurity all the time. Otherwise, we got a hit, if not today, but tomorrow. So we need to be paranoid, we need to be vigilant, we need to be skeptical, and we need to be safe. And there is a small picture-in-picture here. Good cyber hygiene is critical to be safe. Thanks for listening, and I'm open for any question that I can answer.
Thank you, Mr. Aydın. Okay, I'm sorry we have a little internet problem here. We try to manage it, but sometimes it may interrupt. You have seen the final survey question popping up in your screen, and we have actually a few questions to our guest. Thank you very much again for your valuable presentations. I will just read actually those questions. Okay, one question from Mr. Hüseyin Ekemen. He is asking your advice to Turkish cybersecurity startups during and after COVID pandemic, and about the funding opportunities, how the sector will evolve later on. I think you both can answer, but Ram, would you start first?
Because of the internet connectivity, I could not understand the question. Is it possible to repeat it, please?
Yes, for sure. There is one question from a guest, and he's asking your advice to Turkish startups which are dealing with cybersecurity, to Turkish cybersecurity startups, your advice, and how the sector will evolve after COVID, and about the funding opportunities, whether they will go better or not.
Well, I can only give advice on how to secure cybersecurity startups, how to secure startups, not how to fund startups, because I'm not aware of the funding possibilities in Turkey. So I'll answer the first question with your permission. We work a lot with SMBs. Startups, for me, most of them are SMBs, and we advise startups to do 5 things. First of all is install proper endpoint detection and recovery, what we call next generation antivirus. That's the first thing I would do. Second thing, we use automated patch management for the endpoints, and we make sure that all the endpoints that access the assets that are important to us are secured. Then we use mobile device management. Sometimes we use mobile device protection, but if you have proper management, then you don't need protection on the mobile devices, or you less need because it's expensive. The third thing is, as was mentioned before by Burak, is employees awareness. Here you can use automated training like KnowBe4 or other companies and increase the awareness of the employees. It should be part of an awareness program. It's not an expensive thing to do. A license can cost you about $60, $70 a year. So it's not something that is very, very expensive. And by the way, every regulation will require you to do cybersecurity and privacy awareness. So it's a good thing. Third, I would do access management to all the important platforms, email, G Suite, Office 365, AWS, Google Cloud Platform. And last but not least, asset management. As I mentioned before, asset management is key. If you don't know what you have, then you don't know what to secure. And the last thing is 2-factor authentication on all the platforms, and especially administrative privileges. And if you're using the Google environment, and Google has the Google Advanced Protection Program, which by using physical keys that look like this, that's a physical key. This is your second factor. And what it actually does is that every time you log into your account, you need your physical key, but you work with your keys anyway, so it doesn't change anything. And you actually do a transition from the virtual space to the physical space, because now if someone wants to hack your computer, they need to have physical access to you. And in the area of COVID-19, it makes it much, much, much harder.
Okay, thank you. Meanwhile, I changed my computer. We have few computers here in case for everything. Okay, sorry again for the internet problem. Mr. Adam, would you like to answer the question again?
Yeah,
your advice?
One more comment on top of Ram's comment. I think the cybersecurity market in Turkey is evolving, and it's happy to see that there are very successful Turkish startups. Cybersecurity startups are coming up one after the other and getting support from the local angel investors and the VCs in Turkey. And I'm also seeing that the cybersecurity startups are becoming scale up and penetrating to other markets. So it's very fortunate to witness that. And with the COVID, I think everything is shifting to more virtual world and digital world. So I think the funding opportunities will be increasing in Turkey, and the government support is coming with different forms from TÜBİTAK or other means. I think we are on the right track, and the angel investors are also the number of angel investors are increasing, and I think that the funding opportunities will be positively affected by the COVID.
Okay, hopefully. Again, another question from Hüseyin Ekemen. He is asking again your opinion about cloud identity and access management market. Rem, would you like to answer? And then Burak, maybe again.
The cloud identity and the access management market is actually a very evolved one. They're quite interesting products. Some of them actually come from Israel, which are interesting to explore. The decision on which provider to choose depends on the architecture, which I don't know. So it should be very specified decision. I think that nowadays cloud identity should be coupled together with another term called zero trust. Because employees work from home, and 67% of employees that work from home actually work from their own devices, meaning now we have to secure their devices, and that creates challenges because young people don't want us to intervene in what they have in their computers, and they don't want us to secure their phones, but they use their phone in order to access the company's digital assets. So I would couple together or bring together two solutions. One of them is the cloud identity, because you need to know who's accessing the assets, but then you want to know using zero trust that only those who have permission to access are the ones that are actually accessing the assets. By the way, Google has a very good cloud identity, which is part of G Suite. It's for free if you use it in G Suite because you don't need a license to it. So you could use that as a cloud identity provider. Yeah, and that's what I have to say regarding this question.
And one or two comments. The cloud is a big hype in the world, and it will continue like this in the foreseeable future. So it's number one. The second thing is the cloud security is one of the biggest growing market. So the cloud security, in line with the moving from on-prem to cloud, the need is very obvious. So the market is accelerating in, I think, cloud security, including the cloud identity and access management market.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Aydin, a question for you, especially. I'm reading the question. Nowadays, companies began to come together to create value for solutions, especially during pandemic. For example, Ford is working together with the United Auto Workers, GE Healthcare, and 3M to build ventilators. So, do you think pandemic will accelerate open innovation?
Yeah, I think so, because it was a big disruption for our lives, and rather than competition, we come up with the competition and helping to each other to solve the common problems. I think it will continue like this. And also, I think the startups are becoming a pivot role in this collaboration. Not only big companies are working together and collaborating, but also in this pandemic world, the big companies are working with the startups and scale-ups to come up with quick products and MEPs together with the startups. I think it's also critical to work with them.
Yes, thank you. Ram, a question for you, especially for you. According to Forbes article, network data and endpoint security are three leading use cases in artificial intelligence in cybersecurity today, according to IT executives. So do you think that does cybersecurity dominate the first issues of every organization as each adapts to post-COVID-19 world? Do you need to read me the question again?
Yes, please.
Okay. According to an article, network data and endpoint security are three important use cases of artificial intelligence in cybersecurity today. So, do you think that cybersecurity will dominate the first issues of every organization after COVID?
Well, I certainly hope so. That's my business. Well, I can tell you what we see. It takes time to convince companies, especially small ones, to spend money on cybersecurity. And I think that from speaking to, I think maybe thousands of companies, that the biggest reason why companies invest in security is not because they think they have a problem, is because if they will not do it, they will not be able to do business. It's a business enabler. And that's key. If you speak to any CEO in the world, everyone will tell you that it's one of their biggest fears. But then if you ask them how much money do they spend on cybersecurity, you will see that the spending does not correlate with the fear. And that's a very known human issue. I mean, so sometimes it's like smoking. We know it's bad for us, but we still do it. So we know that our networks are not secured, and we still don't secure them. When do we start securing it? And I'm going to the question. When someone is requiring us to do it, or the price of not doing it is too high. The first issue is regulation. And for example, GDPR, if you want to work with the EU, you got to comply with GDPR. Complying with GDPR means that at least Article 32 specifically requires you to apply the best practice of security. If you want to work with a bank, and the bank is required to that all their critical suppliers will have some level of security, then if you will not have security, you will not be able to work with the bank. It is a business enabler. And I believe that because we see an increase in the risk and we are more dependent, then there will be more motivation for the regulators to require companies to do security, especially nowadays. So in short, the answer is yes. I think it will become, the new normal will include cybersecurity. By the way, just today, the European Supreme Court decided that the flow of information between the US and Europe is not good enough. It's called Privacy Shield. And right now, European companies or European companies will not be able to store data to the United States. Why? Because the Europeans believe that the Americans have not done a job that is good enough in securing the data of European citizens. This is an example of what happens when politicians intervene and they believe that data is not secured enough and they enforce the regulation on other countries. And I think that's pretty much what's going to happen. So cybersecurity will be included in the new normal.
Okay, thank you. Last very short questions for you. What is the top cybersecurity concern of business actually faces today?
I think the top concern, not of businesses, that the top concern in general is when cybersecurity attacks will stop being attacks against data and will start being attacks on the physical world. We saw a little bit of attacks like that against Iran and against companies, manufacturing companies in Germany and in the United States, but they're very small scale. When we start seeing criminals using cyber attacks in order to murder or to steal property, that will become a big issue because we don't have very good law enforcement. That's the big elephant in the room that nobody wants to speak about. Yes, countries can attack. Attacking is relatively easy, but doing police work and catching criminals is very, very hard. Now think about the situation when someone hacked your Tesla, your autonomous car, and the insurance company doesn't want to pay you because there was written in those little words that you're not covered if there is a failure in the electronic systems, and the warranty doesn't cover you. And by the way, this is a true story. The warranty of Tesla doesn't cover malwares. If your Tesla is being attacked, Tesla says, I'm not covering you. And if you don't read the little lines in the insurance policy, you might not be covered for an attack on your vehicle that caused you to crash, meaning someone wanted to murder you. That is a big issue. And I think this is what we really should worry about, because yes, we've in one way or another, we have given up our privacy. And we can discuss whether it's the greatest theft of wealth in human history. How bad is it? Maybe it's bad and we should control it. But when people will be killed and factories will start producing, this can create real chaos because of the lack of attribution and the lack of law enforcement. For me, this is the biggest issue that we need to address right now.
I think the biggest security concern for the business today is the human ignorance, especially because the people are really ignorant about the cybersecurity breach and the holes. They really don't take the learnings. they don't really care about the quizzes. They don't really care about the assessments. That's very critical for the cybersecurity. And the human ignorance is very, very dangerous. So that's the top concern of the business life.
And final question, actually you answered a little bit at the beginning of the question and answer session, but your advice actually to those people who wants to create startup businesses about cybersecurity.
Well, I think there's a big opportunity right now.
Yeah.
But the cybersecurity space is very big. I mean, it's a very massive, big area. So the Turkish startups should be very careful about, I mean, addressing which part of the cybersecurity plays, what's the maturity level of the space, and what's their product will bringing to this space, how they are going to differentiate, how they are going to compete with the other companies in the world, and how they are going to create the value. It's critical.
Okay, thank you. So we're almost at the end of our session today. We hope that this intellectual partnership in between TTGV and the Embassy of Israel will bring new insight to the area. So we would like to give our warmest thanks to the Embassy of Israel in Turkey. And Mr. Cengiz Ulusoy, would you like to add something on behalf of TTGV? Yes.
I'd like to thank our speakers, Ram and Burak, for the wonderful insight they have provided to our participants. These are the current participants. I'm sure there'll be also future viewers of these presentations and discussions, and we appreciate your contribution very much. And Mr. Gilad, thank you very much for participating as the embassy. We look forward to further cooperation at institution level, at company levels, and I think this is the time to grow this relationship. And I'm looking forward to further cooperation in this respect.
Thank you very much to our speakers and also to our guests for listening us. And we hope to see you next time again. Thank you. Good afternoon again.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Bye-bye, and thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.